Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fueled by Impact. I have a question for you. When was the last time you ran 100 miles, maybe 200 miles straight to raise money for charity? Well, if you haven't gotten around to that yet, my guest today can be your inspiration, your motivation. He is Scott Jenkins. Scott is an ultra marathon runner who really needs no introduction. He trains for and runs these grueling races on the side of a full-time job, working as a regional manager for J&J. I feel very humbled to be introducing you to this guest. And so enough from me. Let's get to the interview. Well, Scott, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, Mike, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to come and chat to you today. How's things yourself? You all good?
Things are wonderful. Things are really good. So thanks for asking. I appreciate that.
No problem.
So why don't we get going just by having you give us a little bit of introduction about who this crazy guy is.
That's very kind, very kind. So my name's Scott Jenkins. I am an ultra runner in my spare time. In the daytime, I work in orthopedics for Johnson & Johnson. But yeah, my passion outside of work is ultra running and trying to raise money for worthy causes. In particular, Operation Smile is a charity that I support. So they provide surgical intervention for children with cleft lips and cleft palates all around the world. So it's something I'm very passionate about. And I love doing a little bit of adventure along the way. So I've taken part in ultra marathons all over the world and different challenges, running, cycling all over the world as well over the course of the last 11 or 12 years. So that's a little bit about me. I'm 40, going slightly grey, probably from all that ultra running, but it's lovely to meet you, Mike.
Could be, because you've got quite the impressive history with respect to ultra running. So I want to dive into that because I'm wildly curious. I don't have that in my repertoire at all. And so maybe you can just start off by introducing us novices to what is Badwater. Tell me about Badwater.
Badwater 135 is considered the world's toughest foot race. So it takes place in July of every year. It's 135 miles non-stop running from the lowest point in North America, which is Badwater Basin. It's 282 foot below sea level, to what's technically the highest peak, if you like, in North America, which is Mount Whitney in the lower 48 states. So they can't race right to the top of the mountain because that's 14,000 feet. So we race to 8,500 feet, which is the Whitney Portal, which is where the road ends. Obviously, the challenges there are obviously the heat first and foremost. So you're talking about temperatures that are in extreme of 50 degrees Celsius, which I believe is around about 124 Fahrenheit.
Oh.
It's a really tough foot race. It's super hot, and obviously you're running a hell of a long way, so you can't do it without crews. I've been very lucky to be supported by my wife, my friends on the endeavour and on the journey to do Badwater, and it's been a 11-year dream for me since I read a book about it, and I just thought, wow, it would be great to compete in that race one day, and that's what I set my heart on doing. And finally, 11 years later, I've managed to do it, which I'm obviously quite pleased about.
Congratulations. That's just an amazing accomplishment. That's really awesome.
Oh, thank you. It's really kind.
You did that just this year in July. So this was a very recent accomplishment.
Yeah, so it was, I think I finished on July the 21st. So that was Badwater. And then 3 weeks later, I found myself, after flying back to London to do my day job, flew back out to LA and then up to Seattle. Drove 3 hours into the mountains and took part in a race there called the Bigfoot 200, which is an equally tough race. It's a different type of hardness. It's a true mountain race, and it was very, very difficult. And that's a 200-mile foot race. I don't want to break any spoilers or anything, but I got 160 miles through that one and DNF'd. So just goes to show that, I guess, when you set yourself a good challenge, you never really know what the outcome might be. There's no guarantee that it'll go well. And it was always going to be a difficult ask for me doing such a quick turnaround between two really, really difficult races. So certainly learned a lot over the course of the last month or so.
Take me along that journey a little bit. So what happened to you during the Bigfoot race? And actually, if you want to go back, I'd also love to hear, like, Badwater, what was the experience like for you? And, was it pretty, as textbook as something like this could be for you?
It's a good question, that, Mike. I think that ultras are never really kind of textbook, and one of the great challenges with ultra runners, with ultra running and doing these massive distances, as I say a second ago, you don't really know with any certainty what's going to happen. You can train as hard as you like, but there's going to be problems along the way, and you get more and more fatigued. But the key element for me that in my humble experience, what I found over the course of the last 11, 12 years is that actually being able to problem solve before those small problems become a big problem, which leads to a DNF, ultimately can lead you to success. And actually, you know, my day job, I work as a regional manager in London for J&J in hip and knee replacement. And what I've kind of learned is that there are similar parallels, right? You go and try and win a big account in business, and it's never straightforward. You're going to have ups and downs along the way and setbacks. And it's very similar with ultra running. And actually, I've learned a lot from both that I can apply to each other, and they kind of cross over in this kind of weird way. And it all comes down to mindset. You know, ultimately, it's how you react to those setbacks, and, you know, can you take them on the chin? Can you dust yourself off, get up, and keep moving forward? That will ultimately see you to the end of the ultra marathon, or to the end of a big business deal, whatever it might be, whatever your goal is. I think dealing with those small problems early can really help get you to the finish line. So for me, again, I apologise, I've gone off slightly on a tangent, but for me, Badwater didn't go textbook. I had a great plan, had a great vision. I thought it all through and thought, okay, this is exactly what I expect is going to happen. What's the Mike Tyson quote? And I don't really like to quote Mike Tyson, but he says everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face.
Indeed.
And got down to the start of Badwater and, you know, metaphorically speaking, got punched straight in the face.
Oh, yeah.
There was this huge headwind for the first kind of 40 miles. And I thought about everything. I thought about the heat, thought about hydrating, thought about fueling, all those things. One thing I didn't think of in that heat was like, it could be really windy. And it was really, really windy. So immediately I had to kind of think about my strategy here. You know, in my head, I thought I've got a certain pace that I want to run to. And now I need to accept that because of that headwind, that pace is going to dramatically differ. And actually, you know, this isn't about a 40-mile race. This is about a 135-mile race. And you've got to kind of get through the first night. Then you've got to get through the heat of the second day and get through the second night. And we're talking, you know, the first 30 miles, 40 miles of that. So it took a lot mentally to kind of dial it back and say, okay, it's all right to be a bit slower, but you need to conserve the energy rather than try and fight the wind. And that was, you know, one of the problems that I had to solve. And I guess to talk around the textbook piece, I feel like I problem solved really well in Badwater. And when these things are occurring, whether it blisters or whatever it was, the wind, the heat, I was able to adapt and, you know, make sure that my strategy kind of, going back to that first point, the ups and downs didn't derail me completely from where I wanted to be. And ultimately that kind of led to a successful finish, I guess.
So like the pace change, is that the kind of thing that, like, is there then a cascading impact? Yeah,
definitely. So I think one of the things that was really interesting is that Badwater starts in 3 different waves. So you kind of, as Chris Cosman, the race director, says, you've got the fast, you've got the fastest, the faster, and you've got the fastest, and they start at 8, 9:30 and 11 respectively. And I was in this middle field at 9:30. And actually what it meant was that no matter what time you start, you have to be past the 2,000-foot elevation sign on the side of a big climb called Towns Pass by 10 a.m. the next morning. And that's to do with the permitting of the park. Now, because, you know, if I sat here and told you about what my plan was, I was very confident that I'd be able to do that from that 9:30 wave, based on my pace in other races and taking into consideration the heat and all those good things. I thought, yeah, okay, you know, I'm quite confident I can do that. What happened was that wind, that problem, became a slightly bigger problem because I found myself slowing down, frustratingly so, to deal with that headwind. And then when the sun came up in the morning, you know, I got to 42 miles and I've still got 8 miles to go up the side of this mountain, thinking, hang on, because I've had to go slow here because of the wind, I'm now under the gun a little bit to get to this cutoff before you get DNF'd out of the race. And again, I've never really been in that situation, but that shows you how one problem leads to another, right? And that then meant that come 9:50 a.m., I find myself sprinting up a mountain to make sure that I haven't flown all this way halfway around the world just to get timed out at the very first opportunity. And then obviously the knock-on effect is that, you know, when you go sprinting up a mountain in 45-degree heat at 10 a.m. in the morning, it takes it out of you pretty quickly, because that's not the pace that I wanted to maintain over the whole race. And that then meant that I had to have a 45-minute break. So you can really see how those things can quickly spiral out of control if you let them, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've not ever sprinted up a mountain in 45 degrees Celsius
It's
heat,
not very nice.
so I wouldn't know, but I can
I
imagine.
recommend it.
Yeah, okay. Well, so and then take me then back to the Bigfoot experience. And you said, so that one you didn't finish, but you made it 160 miles, which to me is a victory and then some. But still, yeah, maybe what happened there, and just tell me the story of Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, well, I went into the forest to find Sasquatch, and I didn't find him, but I certainly found a hell of a tough time. That was for sure. So the thing with Bigfoot was that you're coming off a really tough race in Badwater, where the kind of effort that you put in to finish something like that is almost akin to, in terms of the overload on like your central nervous system, on your muscular system, on your aerobic capacity. It's your 1 rep max. You're going all in. And then, as soon as I finished that race, I'm thinking, okay, I'm super pleased, because this is obviously an 11-year dream to do. But I didn't really want to celebrate, because I knew I've got 3 other big races. So I was like, that's great. I'm really pleased, but let's keep things in perspective. I've got a long-term goal here that I want to achieve. And that was to do Badwater, do Bigfoot, do the Tahoe 200, and then the Moab 240. So I came back to London. Obviously, you got the jet lag coming home. I was home for about 2 and a bit weeks. Then I flew back to LA on a Wednesday afternoon, and then got an internal flight up to Seattle. Got into Seattle at like 11:30 at night. Went to my friend's house, slept there, obviously jet lagged again. Got up at like 9 a.m. Drove 3 hours down to the race check-in on the Thursday, because I'm so limited on time, because I'm using all my annual leave for these races and this passion project, if you like. Got down there, checked into the race, then I had to drive, because it's such a remote race, right? It's way out there in the Cascades. It's 200 miles or whatever it is from Seattle, in a small town called Randall, Washington. And, that's the finish line. And you're probably looking at like a gas station and maybe a restaurant in town kind of thing. Then I had to drive an hour back to the nearest larger sized town, should we call it, that had a Holiday Inn Express. I checked in, got some food, tried to go to sleep at like 8 p.m. The whole night I had nothing but like train tracks. Like it must have been like half a mile from the hotel. So every time a train came through town, you could be sure they were on the horn on the train. It was just absolutely exhausting. And that's even before I started the race. Then I'm up at 3:45 to drive back an hour to the finish line of the race, where they put on some transportation to take us down to the start of the race, which actually didn't end up starting until 9:30. So I'm stood there thinking, what time zone am I in? Like, what day is it? And this is before it's even started. So, I tried to think about, just focusing on that race. Don't focus on the negatives. You're going to be tired, because you're going to be out there all weekend. So let's just consider that part of it. Park the last race. Don't think anything about that. And let's just go and enjoy what's an awesome experience. And I do feel slightly privileged to be healthy and well enough to go and do these races and at least try them, right? So not everyone gets that opportunity, and I feel grateful for that. So I gave it my best shot. Off we went. It was 40 degrees Celsius. But differently to Badwater, your crew aren't with you all the time, because it's so remote. You're on a single track trail, you're covering 20-mile sections. So that first day, straight away, I'd obviously come from sea level in London to 6,000 feet above sea level in Washington. Heart rate elevated straight away. Then the heat comes on, and just trying to survive, like battle through these sections. And I was helped out by another runner, Katra Corbett. She's her handle's Dirt Diva on Instagram, and a great runner and a great like ambassador for the running community. She gave me some super electrolytes that kind of perked me enough to life to get to the aid station. And to put it into perspective, I thought I would be at like the 42-mile point before the sun went down, and when the sun went down I was just over like 25 miles. So I'd really had a tough day of it in the heat. With all of that considered, I was being sick because I was dehydrated. My urine looked like Coca-Cola. And this is day one and 30 miles, and I get into this aid station completely exhausted, and just thinking to myself, well, you've come all this way, you can't just stop at 30 miles. I better take some food on board and try and get some hydration on, which is exactly what I did. And then, obviously, the jet lag kicked in my favour, because it's 11 p.m. at night now in the West Coast, but in London it's 8 a.m. in the morning. So all of a sudden I just, boom, come back to life. And I felt like, really, really good. Ran through that night and I was wide awake until about, must have been like 3-4 in the afternoon the next day, and I'm starting to think, I feel really tired all of a sudden. That jet lag was still with me at that point, going into the second night. So that was the first section of the race, which was obviously very difficult. And then from there, it didn't relent. It just got harder and harder, and it's definitely one of the most difficult races I've been at. That and Badwater for sure. Basically, the elevation was absolutely savage. It's 42,000 foot of elevation gain in the entirety of the 200-mile race.
Crazy.
Everest is 27,000 foot, so that gives you some kind of perspective on how difficult that is. And then, from there, sleep deprivation kicked in, but also I had a really bad problem, and it's getting better now, I must say, overuse problem, surprise, surprise, with my left IT band, and it basically locked up on me, so I couldn't run anymore. It meant that I was able to hike pretty quickly the uphills, but the downhills and the flats, I couldn't run, which was so frustrating because normally you kind of want to conserve and eat and re-energize on the tough uphills by getting on the food whilst you can and run the downhills and the flats. And it was the opposite for me. And that was really, really frustrating. But I just, again, kind of worked through that list of what the problem is and how I can resolve the problem to kind of keep moving forward. And in the end, it came down to a couple of things. So number one, painkillers worked their wonders to keep me moving. Number two, every time I kind of got to a water crossing, I just shoved my knee in the water for 5 minutes to try and cool it off. And then number three, I went into an aid station at 120 miles. Best aid station I've ever been, Lewis River aid station, Bigfoot 200. Halfway towards the aid station, it was an out and back, like 2 miles each way or something like that. They left a small table. Do you want to take a guess at what was on the table?
No, I have no idea.
Come on. Don't sit on the fence. Don't sit on the fence, Mike. Take a guess.
I'm going to say a beer, because that's what you really needed.
I did have a beer during the race, actually. So you sure we haven't met before? So no, so they left out a table of bourbon. I am partial to a scotch or to a bourbon. And on the way into the aid station, I managed to get a nice shot of Knob Creek. And on the way back down past the small table, I thought, well, this is good. You're going to be out here for another 2 nights and everything hurts, so why not? I had a Maker's Mark. Now, I'd definitely go with the Knob Creek over the Maker's Mark. I don't know if that's slightly controversial. Shout out to Knob Creek if they ever want to sponsor an ultra runner. Send the whiskey my way. So that kept me going, kept me energized for another kind of 24 hours. And then the sleep deprivation really kicked in. And got through that section into what for me turned out to be the last day, which was Monday. And originally in my pre-race plan, I was hoping to finish Monday evening. How wrong I was. Came down a 4,000 foot climb into a river, across the river, realized that, now it's getting to crunch time. The kind of time cutoffs are getting closer and closer. But at the same time, I'm battling the sleep deprivation and trying to keep moving forward without getting lost or falling over and hurting myself. Eventually managed to get up another climb, which is about, I believe it's about 3,000-4,000 foot. Beautiful views. Then I came into the aid station. It was obviously dark by this point, the Klickitat aid station. And I kind of turned around to one of the volunteers. And during the whole of the day, I'd had this weird feeling of deja vu. And it'd been with me for about 4 or 5 hours by this point. And I spoke to one of the volunteers. I said, excuse me, would you mind just pinching my arm to see whether this is real or not, as the case may be? And she pinched my arm and was like, oh, okay, all right, that's enough. I know it's real. And she said, you okay? I said, oh, not really. I think I need to sleep. So she said, look, you're running out of time here. Get a sleep, and then you need to get some fresh socks on and get out of the aid station. I was like, okay. And I knew this section coming up. It's notorious in the ultra running world as being one of the most difficult sections because it's very overgrown, and obviously you've got people coming into that section where they're very, very tired and exhausted, and it's very difficult to keep track of where you're going without a good pacer alongside you. And I was very fortunate I had someone helping me, but I kept falling over, wandering around in circles, and my buddy Jace Hinsley, who's a great ultra runner himself, was helping me, and I couldn't get it together. And then I kind of ended up back at the aid station. I just left, fell asleep, woke up and realised that obviously I'd missed the time cut off 160 miles into the race. And I'll be honest with you, I was pretty upset, felt very alone because obviously, traveled halfway around the world to do this race and I'm in the middle of nowhere, thinking, what do I do? How do I even get out of here, let alone, take in the whole situation? I feel like I've given everything, and it's hard to take when you give everything and you don't get the result that you want. And in that immediate aftermath, I managed to get hold of my wife and speak to her, and she tried to console me a little bit. And it's still tough to take now, but the thing that I do console myself with, and it's something that I've learned over the years, again through ultra running and in business as well, is that you've got to take the learnings from failure. And sometimes the biggest successes in life can be born out of some of what we feel or perceive as being our biggest failures. And that's certainly something that I've been trying to do. I've written down a list. I'm like, okay, I've got this wrong. I got this right. What does that mean? How do I work through that? Sleep is still something that I've got to personally master during these races, but I think I've got a strategy. We'll see soon enough next month. So that was Bigfoot. I hope that didn't bore anyone too much, but it was a great mountain race. And Destination Trail, Candy Spurt, who's the race director there, they put on some incredible events. And I just want to say thank you to all the volunteers and the staff and the race team there that really looked after me.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's wild. It's hard for me to even fathom that type of experience. Well, so I got a question for you. I mean, these sound like some incredible sufferfests. Why? What drives you? Why do you do this?
It's a really good question. I've often kind of considered it because I have so much time when you're out there, not only just when you're out there running in the races, but also the training element as well. And I think there's a couple of things for me, but when I was younger, I worked as a personal trainer in a gym in South Wales, which is where I'm from. And there was a cardiac group there. They'd been through cardiac arrest, cardiac kind of issues, stents, whatever it might have been, surgery. And what really struck me about those guys is that obviously they're older demographic, but they were so enthusiastic about the little things in life. So it got me kind of thinking, why are they so happy? Why is it? Because they've got this second chance? And talking to them, it was really interesting to kind of get their perspective on what they really look back on and, what they still wanted to achieve in life. And it got me thinking, what do I want to look back on in life when I get older? And what will it be that, I kind of treasure as memories? And obviously you've got family and friends and what we do in work and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it was like, number one, I want to have an adventure and I want to do things that are fun and challenging. But number two, can I use that to help others as well? So what I started doing back in 2010, the first big challenge that I ever did was that me, my brother and our friend Rusty from Texas, we flew out to Boston and we ran 2,000 miles from Boston, Massachusetts to Austin in Texas. Wow. And back in those days, you barely just had an iPhone and we were reading off the maps, and it was an amazing adventure. And I met so many cool people. And I must say, I've always loved coming to the States. For some of the most hospitable places and people on earth, I would say. And it was just an incredible time, incredible adventure. And it actually got me to thinking, I love what I do. I'm very interested in anatomy and biology, but also I'd like to have something that I'm passionate about outside of my career as well. And that's what it was. It's like, I like that physical and mental challenge of taking something on. You don't know whether it's possible, but also I want to do some good along the way. And that's hopefully one day what I'll look back on with a little bit of pride as I get older in life, I suggest.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And that's also a really cool story about the Boston to Austin. So can you tell me a little bit, you mentioned earlier, so you have a full-time corporate job. You said you're a regional manager. Talk to me a little bit about so what is the job, the nature of the job? Do you have a team? Are you leading a team?
Yeah.
Because I think it's amazing that you're balancing these two things. And I've got some things I'd love to explore with you on the job side.
Sure. And slightly ironic, right? That an ultra runner specializes in hip and knee replacement.
Indeed.
Especially when I have conversations with some of my customers as well. You tell them what you do in your spare time and they're like, oh, that's really interesting. but what I would say is that actually, when you see patients undergoing hip and knee surgery, it's not often because they've been out running 200 miles. It's more often because of our sedentary lifestyle in this day and age. And it's something that, it happens, right? But to answer your question, I'm a regional manager for Johnson & Johnson. I manage a team of 11 people across pretty much the city of London. And what they do is that they go into theatre and they assist surgeons interoperatively with advice on our instruments and implants. Our company manufacture those implants and instruments, and ultimately, the really good people are the ones that can go in there and really add value to a surgeon's procedure by supporting them with good, solid advice on how our instruments work.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier, you started to talk about some of the ways in which these two things support each other. What have you taken from the Ultra that's directly impacted your role, both from a business standpoint, but also from a leadership and leading other people standpoint? And then the other way as well. What have you taken from that experience as a leader that you carry with you onto the course?
It's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. It's something that I do think about, and I think first and foremost, the ultra running in a way helped me to get the job at J&J directly. So when I applied for the job with J&J nearly 10 years ago now, I kind of had an interest in hip and knee replacement because of my role as a PT and how the anatomy functions. And when I went to that interview, the guy that was interviewing me said, when you come to the interview, I'd like you to prepare a presentation. And the title of that presentation is Blood, Sweat and Tears. So, a year after, this was a year after I'd run Boston to Austin. So I was like, I think I've got you covered on the Blood, Sweat and Tears presentation. And I went in and you know what, the rest is history. I guess he must have enjoyed the presentation. I think the thing with the ultra running is it's taught me everything I need to know about mindset and patience. I think, when you're younger in life, you're desperate to get on to the next thing and you want to do everything you can here and now. And I think with the ultra running, it's taught me that process of definite patience. And you need that in a role like I do, because the sales process can be so long and the job can be so stressful, and ultra running helps you to put it into perspective. I was presenting to our team here in the UK this afternoon to 100 people, and I was talking exactly about this point, is that, in the ultra running world, you get huge challenges, and in the business world, you get huge challenges. Like I said earlier, it's just how you react to those challenges and put things into perspective that will ultimately determine that kind of positive end goal, whatever that may be. And it's not just in medical devices or in ultra running, it can be applied to anything, I personally believe. So those are the kind of key things that I've learned, and also to deal with problems as soon as possible, right? Before they spiral out of control. And that's exactly what I try to do in both worlds, I guess.
And the mindset point is really, I think, interesting and important, because I think a lot of people have met people who say that so-and-so is really positive. Like they're just a really positive person, or whatever the favorable mindset trait is. And what I'm hearing from you is like, this was learned as well. I mean, maybe you started off from a pretty positive place to begin with, but there are aspects of mindset that can be learned, can be trained, as opposed to just being these innate things. What are one or two ways in which your mindset has shifted from when you started running the ultras to today?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I think the mindset, you can have a certain level, but it doesn't mean that you can't stop trying to improve your mind the same way that you try to train your body, right? We're always trying to push ourselves to get fitter and stronger, and I think we've got to think about the mind in the same way. One of the things that I've definitely learned from ultra running is that element of perspective, which I touched on a second ago. So, one of my team might ring me up and say, "Hey Scott, we've got a really difficult conversation we need to have with a customer about price, or a complaint, or whatever it might be," right? And you think to yourself, all right, yeah, let's go and have that conversation. I've got no problem having that conversation. And how am I able to do that? Well, I'm able to draw against perspective of being in harder physical and mental situations. So, when it comes to having a conversation over a coffee in West London, I just think to myself, wow, you've been in a harder situation where you're running for 4 days, 88 hours through the forests and mountains where, one wrong foot and you break your leg, or even worse. So I think it's definitely taught me that perspective, if that makes sense. And that's definitely something that I think is teachable, because until you put yourself in that really difficult, visceral situation, physically and mentally, whatever it might be, and you don't really have that as a reference point. But having that reference point is golden, because then you're like, I've got no problem presenting to 500 people. It's easier than going wrestling mountain lions in the Pacific Northwest or running across Death Valley. So yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I think you can train. Another element of mind training, I read a book on this, and by all means, I'm an amateur sports psychologist at best. But one of the things that this book said was that when Tiger Woods gets on a golf tee, no matter what the hole is, there's water hazards in front of him, there's sand traps everywhere. He just looks at the green, and obviously I'm not sure what Tiger's form is like at the moment, but when he was a very good golfer, he'd just look at the green and put the ball next to the hole. But when you and I pick up a golf club and we go to the golf course and we put our ball on the tee, the first thing we look up and see is the lake, the hazards. And we've almost programmed ourselves to knock that ball straight into the drink, if you like. And that's the difference. And somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago, she said, did you ever think that you weren't going to make it across Death Valley? I said, no, not at all. No, I didn't mean that to be arrogant in any way, but I was just confident enough that it didn't cross my mind. And I think that was probably one of the reasons why I was so upset about Bigfoot, is that until it happened, it hadn't really crossed my mind. I was talking to someone the other night, and he said, what was it like when you crossed over the 100-mile mark? I said, I didn't even notice. I had to think about it for a minute, and I think, oh, yeah, I crossed the 100-mile mark, like right where I said earlier, where I got that whiskey. It was around that point, and I was thinking to myself, actually, I'd never even thought about it until that conversation on Tuesday night this week. So I think, the power of the mind is definitely something that you can use in business and in ultra running or whatever you're passionate about, I reckon.
Absolutely. Can we go to Operation Smile? How did this come into your life, and why Operation Smile, and what have been some of the ways in which you've been able to support that charity?
Sure. So as I say earlier, when I started in 2010, I picked a project to want to support, which is the British Heart Foundation and Help for Heroes for our fallen military comrades and injured veterans. And I supported them for that run, and then I picked another charity the year after, because I was like, wow, I want to try and impact as many charities and people as possible. And then I went to work for J&J, and when I started working for J&J, they showed me this great video, and it was something that never really crossed my mind. It was a Coldplay video, and in this, the music was Coldplay, I should say. In the video were these obviously small children and young adults from all over the world that had these awful deformities, cleft lip, cleft palate, holes where their lip just haven't joined together. And I was just kind of blown away, really kind of saddened by, what's a problem that in the West we can fix really quickly, right? It's done pretty much just as children are born, I believe. And in developing countries, that just simply doesn't happen. They grow up, they can't eat food, food's coming out of the nose or out of the mouth, and they get ostracized from society. And the more I read, the more I kind of learned about the charity, the more I kind of thought to myself, do you know what? A smile is the kind of universal language of the world. We all use it, and we all kind of, we take it, it's something we kind of take for granted. And to not have that power to, I've come on the call and you and I instantly building rapport because we're smiling at each other, to not have the power to do that must be very, very sad. And I decided that I wanted to support them. So back in 2015, I went and did a run across Death Valley as part of my CV building, if you like, to one day get into Badwater, but at the same time do some good, raise some money for Operation Smile. It was really successful. I came back and J&J said, look, you're obviously really passionate about this. Would you like to go on a mission to Ethiopia? I said, yeah, of course. Like, I've never even thought about going to Ethiopia. I'd love to go. And yeah, they sent me off to northern Ethiopia. I spent a week working with doctors, nurses, volunteers out there in a kind of ramshackle hospital up in northern Ethiopia. I was just blown away by the dedication of the volunteers and the surgeons and the nurses. I met some wonderful families and children, and I just thought to myself, do you know what, I feel so passionate. I want to just keep trying to support this charity as much as I possibly can over the subsequent years. And here I am, 2021, still kind of raising money. What I would say is that so far this year, myself and our team as a whole in the UK, the medical devices team of Johnson & Johnson, we've raised 77 smiles for children all around the world. And
wow,
that makes me so happy to
great.
kind of discuss, and something that I'm kind of proud of. And I really want us to just get to that 100 number before the end of the year. That would be cool. So that's my kind of story and journey with Operation Smile.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's really beautiful.
Thank you, man.
So I have one last question. Before I get there, I want to just make sure that I direct people to where they can learn more about you, about what you're up to, about Operation Smile. So anywhere that we should direct people.
Oh, thank you so much. So yeah, you can follow me on Scott J Jenkins at Instagram. So yeah, just find me on there. I post the link to my donations page in my profile on Instagram. I haven't got a website or anything like that. So yeah, if people want to check out that, they can do. I've got 2 more big races coming up. Well, I say 2 more, actually. Sadly, one of them, I'm not sure, you're probably familiar, they've got some severe forest fires out in California at the moment. And sadly, because of the risk to life there in the local community, the Tahoe 200 has been cancelled or postponed to next year. Really agree with the decision, and it's the right one. And I just pray for the local community and the volunteers there that they can get that thing under wraps as soon as possible. For me, the next race is the Moab 240-mile ultra marathon on the 8th of October in Moab, Utah. So got my goals and my focus on that one, and people can follow along. And if they feel free to chuck a couple of quid or a few dollars towards Operation Smile, that would be much appreciated.
All right. Well, I will include links for everybody to all of that.
Thank you so much.
So as my last question, and I'm quite certain you probably do not think about it this way, but maybe I'll ask it anyway in this way, which is...
I'm excited for this question now. What's it going to be?
What would you want people to take away as the message from your life and the way that you're choosing to live your life?
I think I maybe said it earlier, is that think about what we really want to be proud of in life, and think about what we want to remember. And I think most people will want to remember good times with their friends and their family. The things we aren't going to remember are going to be, the stressful day I had in work on the 2nd of September 2021, or the Netflix show I watched, in August 2020, or whatever it's going to be. I think it's going to be the things that you did positively to impact others, and having that adventure along the way with your friends and family, and those moments, those memories that you can cherish. And if you can couple that with doing some good to help others, then I don't think you'd be far wrong.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
That's just my perspective.
Oh, it's a good perspective.
Thank you.
Well, Scott, I've really enjoyed this conversation. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you for taking the time and for joining me, for sharing all of this insight and more about your journey. And likewise, I want to wish you luck in the Moab 240.
Thank you. And I have signed up for Bigfoot again next year, just to let you know. So I won't let that one get away either.
All right. Well, good luck with that one as well. And I will be following along, and can't wait to hear about your amazing finish on that one too.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks for asking such great questions. It's lovely to have a conversation with you, and have a nice evening.
Got a cool story to share? Hit me up at MikeCav.com. That's MikeKav.com. Don't forget to give this a like, review on Apple Podcasts, and share it with people. It makes a huge impact and helps keep it going. But above all else, lead your movement.